Also want to note that a lot of what we're going to talk about today in this webinar has to do with Comlex too. Now, I did not take Comlex, so I can't tell you exactly how the testing center differs or what some of those specific like OMM questions are. I apologize, but a lot of this is still the same, and a lot of people who take Comlex also take step one. So this is very helpful for our DO friends as well. So we're going to get going. At any point, please utilize, the chat and the poll feature as well. And we'll save all your questions for the end, but we'll have a good time. So yeah, as you can see here, you can change your chat box to send message to everyone so everything can be read, or you can use the Q&A feature to ask questions, which I actually really love the Q&A feature. I love that Zoom added that. So whatever floats your boat. This is myself. I am a Sketchy ambassador. I've been working with Sketchy for 4 years now. Very thankful for that. I'm a fourth year student at the University of California, Irvine. My last day in the hospital is Thursday, and I graduate on May 17th. So I'm an incoming emergency medicine resident at the University of California, Davis Medical Center. That's the first time I've ever said that, and it feels pretty cool. So I found out that I matched um, on back on Friday. And I'll just answer this question now. There was a question about what is Comlex. Comlex is the board exam that our osteopathic friends have to take as well. So that is what Comlex is. If you do not go to a DO school, you do not have to take Comlex. Okay, let's get going. So the purpose of this is to discuss a few things. So we're going to talk about the dedicated period and some study schedule tips. And really, I just want to let you know that what we're going to be focusing on today is not me trying to talk and tell you how you should study, how many URL questions you should do per day, anything like that. It's really more kind of the nitty-gritty stuff that we oftentimes forget. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, again, the dedicated period and study schedule, how to know when you're ready to take it, which is a very large topic, wellness, what to know for test day besides medicine, and then we're of course going to do a Q&A and a giveaway at the end. A 6-month sketchy sub, I think is worthwhile for sitting through me talking to you for about 45 minutes or so. Um, all right, let's get going. So, the dedicated period and study schedule tips, okay? So what there is other places that call this something different, not necessarily dedicated, but like an intensive study period or whatnot. Dedicated essentially is this colloquial term for when you are solely studying for your board exams. Most medical students have the luxury of studying just for their board exam for a designated period of time. Some people will have to do it along with rotations and along with classes and whatnot. But for the most part, most medical students are going to have anywhere from 0 to 8 weeks or so to dedicate their life to their board exams. Essentially, really though, how long you need for this period is really based on what your foundation is. How good of a foundation have you built during pre-clerkship? What is your test taking ability? I hate to say it, but medicine is full of standardized tests. We're gonna have to focus on how to be a good test taker, and there's some strategies in here that we can talk about too. And then ultimately, what I think is probably the biggest driving factor is your practice exam scores. That's going to dictate a lot of how long you need to study for this exam. So, and again, lumping in Comlex to studying for them at the same time, all that kind of stuff we can talk about later. But really, step one, Comlex and or level one, sorry, Comlex level one, interchangeable. Um, so, something I want to talk about with practice exams is that the official USMLE Step 1 practice exams have a funky name. They're called the Comprehensive Basic Science Self-Assessments, or CBSSA. These are 6 exams, also called forms. They're about $62 each. I checked the website a couple days ago when I was prepping for this. You can buy a bundle of 3 of them at the same time right now and get a discount. Sketchy does not sponsor with USMLE. I'm not paid by USMLE, anything like that. This is me telling you wholeheartedly you should buy these, and these are the most accurate practice exams you can take. So each one of them has four sections, is about 200 questions total. This is where I want to note that, as far as I'm aware, from an official company like USMLE, UWorld, anything like that, there is not a practice exam that mimics the exact length and, amount of questions as the real step one. That doesn't exist. So you're gonna have to do some fidgeting around, which we can talk about. You can take it timed or untimed. The timed one will give you the typical 90 seconds per question. Untimed gives you 24 hours. Take it. And then it provides an adjusted percent correct. So not just wholeheartedly what your percent correct is, it's a little bit adjusted, and what your probability of passing is. Um, I appreciate whoever put it in the chat that Kaplan has them technically, but you have to take their class. See, this is good information. You're teaching me too. But I always found it weird that we never actually had an entire full length, like real thing readily available. I think that's a little funky, but there's ways around that. So this is what it looks like when you buy it. I believe it's form 26 through 31 nowadays. So that is what you get to use. So, more on practice exams. There is another type of practice exam that the USMLE releases that is free, and it's called the free 120. Let me just preface that by saying there's 120 questions. So that's why it's called the free 120. It's 3 blocks of 40, essentially. You can find this on their website. You can find a PDF of it, which you can download and take on your iPad or print out and take as a hard copy. Or you can go to a Prometric testing center and take it there. This is really good for my friends in here. I know there's 195 of you. There's someone out here who has test taking anxiety. This is really good for someone like you, and really good for anyone, honestly. It's not that expensive, and you get to go, and it's essentially taking 4 or 3 blocks of step one at the testing center as practice. And it can be a little expensive. You have to be near a Prometric. You have to find where, you have to find a time to be able to do it and all that, which is infinitely harder than sitting on your couch and taking the practice exam. But I think it's really good practice. So there's some information in here. As you can see, you can screenshot it. This is how you sign up for it. It's essentially the same way that you sign up for step one. But this is going to allow you to take it at the testing center. Again, it can be hard to do this if you try to find a time last minute. And again, I don't know exactly how this really is. But when I was taking it, finding out what version of the free 120 they use at that in-person exam is a little unclear. They update the free 120 every year, and so certain times you might take the year before's versus this year. I don't know. I would take this year's and last year's if you can find it easily online. They keep them archived. But again, it's just a little weird, but worth it. All right. So we're gonna move on to study schedule. Um, So if you don't have one already, so this time we're doing this live and unfiltered on March 25th. I know at my school, UC Irvine, they started their dedicated period on Friday, so a few days ago. Also, shout out if anyone is from UC Irvine here. Hi, good to see you. If you don't have a study schedule already, you need to make one. And so this is my plan of attack. It's really difficult to study for step one, level one, any of these board exams without some form of outline, template, schedule, whatever you want to call it. So this is how I did mine. You are going to work backwards, which feels weird. Open Excel sheet, get out a calendar, print out a piece of paper, do whatever you want. But you're going to choose your exam date, which hopefully you already have an exam date, and put it in writing. You're going to write it down, you're going to type it, you're going to put it on that day. Guess what? You're not going to study that day. Now, you're going to choose for yourself the number of days or weeks that you're going to study and the days off that you need. Um, some people will study 7 days a week. Some people will take Sundays off. Some people will take a Wednesday off. That's just how it is. But you're going to need to figure this out. Then, as we already talked about, there's 6 officially licensed practice exams. I am going to tell you you should take all six of them, please. So schedule 6 days to take your practice exams. You can do that at home, you can go to Starbucks, you can do it at your school, whatever, but write it down. All of this is about writing it down. Those practice exam days are going to be really hard for you to do additional practice questions and reviewing on those same days. So just count the entire day as doing the practice exam. It'll be worth it. Now, there's this question of should you study the day before the exam? I'm a big proponent of not studying the day before an exam and doing something fun, or just not focusing on anything medicine. But you do you. Again, if there's anything that you like to do, please put it in your calendar. Then the rest of these days are considered study days. And so there is a bigger, longer 5 hour webinar I could give on how to actually study for step one. You can do content review. So this is what I like to call mixed methods. So sketchy. All those sketches you watch for pharmacology, I'm not saying you need to watch them again. You certainly can, but it's probably pretty good to click through them. Also, fun fact, Sketchy has a question bank, and you can go through their question bank along with other question banks and whatnot, and that will help prepare you as well. You may have heard of other resources like Pathoma, UWorld, um, Amboss, First Aid, all of these things. That is kind of the gist of what to do on these study days. So content review, sorry, I included some question banks in there. Content review is the basics. USMLE, First Aid, Pathoma, going through Sketchy. This is the baseline content. And then the rest of your study day or the entirety of your study day is practice questions. That is what the majority of people use to study for step one, is just, is doing as many practice questions as you can and reviewing them too. That the review of the practice question is by and large the more important part, for sure. Um, so let's see here. All right. So how to know when you are ready. And also, please, I'm going to direct you to the chat or anyone watching the recording. I'm sure it'll be linked. Sketchy has a free study schedule already made for you. The making of the study schedule, at least in my, in my world, and at least here at UC Irvine, that's the hardest part for our students. It's really scary to have to sit down and plan 6 weeks of studying or 4 weeks of studying. So that is something that you definitely can utilize. There's some comments in here about the CBSE. This is essentially the same thing as the CBSSA. It's just ever so slightly different. It's a different name. Some schools do make you pass it before you can register to take step one. My school did not. But again, CBSE, CBSA, these are all, similar words in there. I appreciate friends in the chat who are answering some of these questions for their fellow peers. That is awesome. So, how do you know when you're ready? I'd love to start this section by saying it's really hard to know when you'll be ready. So the first thing you can do is data-driven, the CBSSA. So if you look on the right of your screen here, this is what your score printout looks like, essentially. Um, you will have the green range is yours. And then they give you this like confidence interval of where you think you're going to fall. And then they give you a low pass range. Um, it's a little hit or miss on what the actual pass percentage is. I've heard anywhere between 61% and 70%. I think it truly does fall around to 63 or 64%, which is why that range is in there. Again, you can look at this entire diagram. I just stole this off their website, but that's roughly how it is. So when I advise people on assessing readiness, excuse me. Um, I want to see two practice exams, ideally one of them taken within a week of your real test date, with a percent correct greater than or equal to 65%. Now, disclaimer, that's not possible for everyone. I know people who have gotten 55% and have passed step one. I know people who have gotten much higher than that and have passed step one. Because all we're going to talk about today is passing step one, because every one of you in this chat is going to pass step one. But ideally, if I had it in my perfect world, I want you to have a couple above 70%. But, Around 65% is what you should be shooting for. When you get this as well, this doesn't really show it, but it will give you a percent chance of passing if you take the exam within a week. Do I know how they calculate that score? I don't. But it sure feels good at a certain point to say you have a 99% chance of passing. So, and you hit that level by breaking a 70%. So, you're essentially just trying to get your confidence interval high enough above this pass range that if you have a bad day, which happens to the best of us, you will still pass. Now, question banks. I can't tell you what percentage of question banks to finish. I can't tell you how many sketchy questions to do. I can't tell you how many videos to watch. I can't tell you how much of pathoma to do. That is all stuff that hopefully your classmates, your mentors, your school, everything like that has advised you on. There's no data on this. The only data that does exist out there is that the more questions you do correlates with a higher step one score. And this was back when step one was still scored. That being said, if you do 2,000 questions and you're just clicking through them randomly, okay, that doesn't really count, right? But what we kind of use colloquially is about 80% or so of most people are going to use UWorld as their main kind of gold standard. Again, we're not biased here at Sketchy. We know you're going to use other resources to pass step one. We want that for you. So around 80% or so of that question bank completed. I encourage you to, when you do the questions, to write down why you got a question incorrect. Don't just be like, oh, I knew this one and move on. The real learning comes from actually reviewing the questions, not taking the questions. Question banks should be learning tools and not testing uh, tools, in my opinion. So again, there's a lot more on the whole kind of question bank topic. But again, make sure you do a good chunk of practice questions. That's really what you need to do. The content review is foundational. The question banks is, as much as I hate to say this, testing your knowledge and helping you get in the mindset of how they're going to ask these questions. So, in terms of readiness, again, probably the biggest thing here too is how do you feel? Did you get a 40% on your last practice exam and you're sad and crying and upset? You might not be ready to take the exam. Or did you get an 80% after 1 week of dedicated? You're probably ready to go. You know yourself better than I do. So base it on how you feel. You're always going to feel anxious to take the test. You're always going to feel nervous, and you're always going to feel a little bit of you like you're going to fail. Just own up to that. That's going to happen. Even, yeah, again, the best of us are going to feel that way. But really, how do you feel about it? Now, I can't give a step one webinar without talking about wellness to some extent. And I promise you, I will do my absolute best to not make this some mandatory wellness lecture that we've all had before. But these are some strategies that I have to avoid the negative aspects of dedicated. So I really encourage you to have a confidant. This is someone that is essentially a two-way street. Ideally, they're maybe around the similar kind of, intellectual level slash test taking ability, blah, blah, blah. That's really hard to know though. But try to have a confidant. You can find this on Reddit. There's Discords for studying for step one, all that stuff. But this is where you share scores, you talk about your struggles, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to share scores if you don't want to. I found it very cathartic to have one friend that we were complete open books and would be like, hey, Form 27 destroyed me. I hated this question. I got a terrible score. I'm taking the day off. That was very cathartic to me. Other things to know is when you hit your limit, uh, studying 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, 16, 18 hours a day, at a certain point becomes negative and it's not beneficial anymore. So know when you hit your limit and honestly, come up with some way to cut yourself off for the day. So if you know for a fact you are a morning studier and you don't like studying at night, set your time I will close my laptop at 6 p.m. I don't care if I haven't finished what I'm doing. I don't care, blah, blah, blah. I'm done at 6. Just because you know from 6 to 10 p.m. there's going to be very minimal learning that is actually going to stick. So that's okay. Limit yourself. 8 hours versus 10 hours a day, I promise you doesn't make a difference. Again, I'm a proponent of taking the day off before the exam. I think that's important. But we'll talk about some other stuff that you can do the day before the exam. I also allowed some flexibility in my schedule. So down here in Irvine, California, I live near some of my in-laws, and they came and visited, and our little niece and nephew came and nephew wasn't born at that point. Niece came to visit. I didn't have it necessarily planned that Saturday afternoon to not study, but I'm telling you right now, I closed my laptop, I went over to their house and hung out with the cutest 2-year-old in the world, and that did wonders for me. So I would allow flexibility when things come up. Now, you have to be diligent. You can't take every day off just because you're not feeling it, or you have to go to the store or the post office, but give yourself some flexibility. I watched a whole ton of Netflix, specifically Love Island UK, around that time. And this was just my way of when I shut my laptop down, I wanted to do nothing that took brain power. And so this could be working out, this could be calling friends and family. For me, it was Netflix, video games, whatever you want it to be. Um, I appreciate it, Sophia. Love Island UK. I don't watch the All Stars. This is a complete tangent. I don't watch the All Stars or anything like that. I like the base ones. Our current obsession right now to deal with match anxiety is Traders. That is currently what reality TV I am watching. Okay. So again, what and how long do you dedicate to yourself during dedicated? So I told myself once I finished my to-do list for the day, which I had, um, either that or stopping kind of at 7 p.m., 6 p.m., whatever, I'm done. I don't care if I could squeeze in an extra hour, an extra block of 20. I'm done. I set a hard stop. And then what I would call me time, quote unquote, 7 to 10 p.m. or so, cooking dinner, watching Netflix, really avoiding anything medicine. I normally got up around 7 a.m. And so I was doing 10, 12-hour days for the most part. It's a slog. It's tough. It's hard. But again, give yourself some time in the middle of the day, at night, in the morning. Go to the gym first thing in the morning. Do what you need to do, but schedule yourself some me time. That is really what you want to do. Okay. Um, and someone asked, yeah, in here, that was perfect timing. I started around 7 a.m. As I'm a morning person. And so 7 a.m. is kind of where I started. Okay. Um, let's see, I'm just going through the chat and I will get to the Q&A at the end. Previous mention of Free 120, how do we receive a scheduling number? Um, they should have instructions on there on their website for how to do that. It's essentially the same process as signing up for step one. You kind of have to register for it. And then is there a Pepper deck separate for all the preclinical subjects? I believe so. You'll have to do some digging on that. But they should be all separated from what I remember. I'm a lucky one. I haven't done Anki for like a year now. So I'm one of the lucky few. Okay. So I also want to tell you guys some things I would do differently next time. And this is going to sound a little counterintuitive, but a lot of this revolves around doing less studying. So I would have seen my friends a bit more. I saw a decent chunk of family, and like there was a couple nights where we hung out with friends, but I probably would have seen my friends a bit more. But the hard part of that too is that you're pretty tired after a whole day of studying. So again, there's pros and cons, right? Um, I was an at-home studier, so I have a really nice like desk and setup and all that, and I love it. But I probably would have switched up my study location a few times, just to get a change of scenery. That's all. And then I am not good at creating boundaries with my extracurriculars. So there was a few research projects, a few events and stuff like that that fell during dedicated. I probably should have moved things around, but I still made time for those. Yes, it filled my cup doing something other than New World and Sketchy, but I probably would have made some stronger boundaries if I had to. Um, okay. My favorite section of this entire webinar. I gave this presentation all specifically just to the UCI students. I'm a big proponent of this. This is something that is really important to me. So This is going to be what to know for test day besides medicine. So again, I don't know why I love this section, but I just do. So when you are taking those six practice exams, right, I want you to take them in a controlled, simulated environment. This is trying to get yourself as close to what that testing center feels like. If you know you're going to wear earplugs, wear earplugs. If you're going to put headphones on, put headphones on. Plan your meals and your snacks the same that you would during test day, and don't put your phone on do not disturb. Turn it off and set it in the side of the room. So every time that I took a practice exam, I actually went to my campus and booked a study room. That forced me in the morning to get up, put clothes on. Sorry, I took all my practice tests and actual studying with clothes on. I understand how that sounds. But put real people clothes on and not pajamas. Drove to campus, turned my phone off, and did my practice exams exactly like I would at a testing center, just minus the thumbprint scanning and blah blah blah. That's really important. You're essentially mind hacking your way to get a better score. Now, food and water. It's a long exam. It's really long. So prepare early. You're gonna have at your testing site large enough lockers for about a small to medium tote bag. Would not bring a backpack if I were you. Most of them have a microwave. Some of them have fridges. Make sure you bring calorie dense foods. And then something that I found really crazy, once you take your break time, which we will talk about, you can leave the testing site. If you want to burn 40 minutes of your break time and drive to McDonald's, you are more than welcome to do that. No one is going to stop you. If you want to step outside during one of your breaks and pull up first aid and study, no one's going to stop you doing that. So I wouldn't recommend leaving the entire testing center to go get food, but it's possible. So just so you know. Now, we're going to skip and talk about breaks for a second and then get back to more nitty-gritty stuff. But you have 45 minutes of break time guaranteed. You can buy yourself an extra 15 minutes by skipping the tutorial. The only thing I recommend to do during that tutorial, again, the tutorial is the exact same as what you're going to do all six practice exams. So that covers that, right? The only thing I would recommend to use that tutorial time are two things. One, you are gonna have to put headphones on at a certain point because there are a couple like heart murmur questions that come up. Make sure your headphones work. That's worth the minute that you're gonna spend. The other portion of the time, you can do one of two things or both. Some people will go through and write down on their little like whiteboard erase sheet and all that important facts, stuff they don't want to forget, whatever, and kind of brain dump. More power to you. Go ahead and do that. That's a great use of your break time or that 15 minutes. I'm not the biggest fan of that, just personally. I used to be, but I stopped doing it. So I used a couple minutes of this time. I closed my eyes. I did some like breathing exercises, and then I jumped right in. So I probably used 3 minutes of that early tutorial time and banked the other 12. So this does say 60 minutes maximum, but I also want to note that if you finish a section early and choose to advance, you get that leftover time. You cannot use that leftover time on additional sections, but it goes in your break time. So there are no breaks in the middle of a block. You got to go straight through. And there's no minimum or maximum amount of time you can take per break, except for whatever you have saved in your bank account of break time. That's what you can use. So again, if you want to use 55 out of your 57 minutes, uh, more power to you. That is, that is what you want to do. So, um, I really also feel like you should simulate your breaks during your practice exams. So again, here's that topic again about simulating test day. You want to use your break time during practice exams so you get used to what you can do in a certain amount of time. How long does it take you to go to the bathroom? How long does it take you to eat a Cliff Bar? How thirsty are you going to get during the day? Now, you have to build in some time for going to your locker, for going to the different kind of, security check-in processes and all that. But for the most part, this is, you can kind of game your way through this too. Um, so let's talk about breaks. Um, this is where we're going to talk about. Sorry, before that, I'm just checking the chat just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Um, Let's see here. I just want to make sure not breaking 65 to 75% by the end of dedicated, maybe scoring within the low pass is a better put off until the end of year three. Um, that's a really difficult question. Hopefully your school has a learning specialist or someone that can help you advise you with that. I think if you're above 60, you're probably safe taking it. I, again, don't hold that to me, but if you at least hit 60 and above, you're probably safe taking it. I don't know if I would put it off. Some schools don't let you put it off. Like my school doesn't let you go to MS3 without passing step one or like taking it, sorry. So that's very specific. But again, I think, as long as you're around 60 or so, you're probably safe. Don't sue me if something goes wrong. But that is my thoughts. Upperclassmen have mentioned wear leggings, pants without pockets, long sleeve shirt, fuzzy socks. Yeah, definitely. The testing center, I think I have a slide on this too. The testing center is normally pretty cold with some AC. So I think I wore like soccer sweatpants or whatever, a t-shirt and brought a jacket if I needed it. Again, you have time to change clothes and all that you want. I personally did have pockets. I get a stuffy nose fairly often, so I had some tissues, and that was fine as well. There's some people talking about where to do the practice exams and the free 120, so thank you for that. Will the banked break time be visible? Are we keeping track of it? It is visible. You don't have to keep track of it. Yes, the CBSSE, it is self-monitored, and this is what we are going to talk about right now. But on the real deal, it is monitored for you. Um, is taking it in a particular state make statistics in your favor? I don't think so. I've never read any literature on that, but I could be wrong. Um, let's see here. I love that people are looking for study partners. Is there an age limit to take step one? I don't think so, but I also don't know. But yeah, you do have a specific amount of times that you can take step one in your lifetime. But I don't actually know. Um, oh, sweet. Prometric allows clear unlabeled water bottles in the testing room. That is super cool. That was not the case for me. I had to check out to drink my water. That is really cool. So thank you for dropping that in the chat. I learned something new today too. Okay. So now that we're caught up on the chat, let's talk about breaks. This is my example. I know it says example one. This is what I did. So between block one and block two, so after that first set of questions, I did not get up from the computer. I used 2 to 3 minutes of break time. Again, I closed my eyes. I did some breathing. I tried to calm myself down and get over those nerves. Between block two and three, I took about 7 minutes or so to eat a Cliff Bar, drink some water, stretch, and walk around. Now, that also includes some time for having to check in and check out. Between block three and four was my quicker break just for bathroom and water. Tried to chug a whole bunch of water, make sure I went pee, everything like that. Between blocks four and five is what I called lunch. I took 20 minutes. I sat outside at my testing center. It was a very sunny day, and I ate. My lunch consisted of a PB&J, a banana, and some peanuts. Those are things that I know sit well in my stomach, can give me plenty of long-lasting nutrition, and that's what I did. I also am a big Spindrift fan. Spindrift, if you ever watch this, please sponsor me. That is what I drank too. Between block five and six, I did about 5 minutes for the bathroom. I drank some more water, had some nuts, and I absolutely love the Trader Joe's dark chocolate peanut butter cups. And so, whatever your favorite thing is, I give myself a nice snack here, like a nice dessert, essentially, to help my mental morale. That is just what I did. And then between block six and seven, I burnt the rest of this time to get prepared for the last block. I apologize for the typo there. I walked outside, I drank water. I didn't end up using all my break time on this exam. I will tell you, when I took USMLE Step 2, I did use my entire break time. But again, all of this, you can also bank time from if you finish a section early too. So this is what I did. Again, when you take those practice exams, simulate this out because this is going to help get your brain prepared for it. Here is a second example. I'm not going to walk through it word by word, but this is another example. So 10 minutes in the beginning, sorry, no break after the first block, then 10 minutes, then 10 minutes, then 30 minutes, then 20 minutes, and then go straight into block seven with some really good affirmations, looking in the mirror, saying, "You got this," all that type of stuff. Now, again, we were going to talk about this. Um, there is the night before preparedness. So you need to print out your testing permit or at least have the PDF saved to your phone for making it easily accessible. There's a couple must bring items. So you have to bring a scheduling permit. So this is again either on your phone or printed out. Have both available, ideally. And then you need a valid, like not expired license or passport. This may vary if you're an IMG and take it in another country. I can't advise you on that one, I'm sorry. But this is, at least in the United States, what is required to take the exam. The night before, set all your belongings out. Pick that cute little outfit that you're going to crush the day in. Set your food, water, and snacks into your little go bag. Do all that the night before. Now, the day before, um, I tell you that you should drive to the testing center. So if your test starts at 8 a.m., you should be up at 7 a.m. or whatever it is. And I think you should mimic driving to the test center the day before. This is ideally at that same time that you would leave the next day. You're going to note the drive time, the traffic. Once you get there, you can identify like a nice warm bench in the sun for your breaks. Find the front door. Go walk in the testing center and just see what it looks like. Walk around the building and find the restrooms. Trust me, do it the day before. It makes your life so much easier and you feel less stressed when you get to it. Now, during test day, you're going to want to arrive at least 30 minutes early. This is to help facilitate the check-in process. And I will tell you, if the check-in process is smooth, you get there early, they'll let you start early. I think we all want this exam over and done with. You'll probably have some anxiety the night before, but at least get there about 30 minutes early or so. When you get there, you're going to sign in on this little sheet. You're going to show them your ID. You'll write down your scheduling number and you'll get a locker key. At that point, you can either go straight in if you want to, if you have nothing to put in your locker, or you can take your time. You can go to the bathroom, put all your stuff in your locker, go outside, call a family friend, whatever, as long as you're before your scheduled start time. At the first check-in, so this is when you leave the testing center for your first break, like, sorry, not even leave the testing center, but when you just like take your first break and then you come back in. Sorry, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. The first time, so this is what you're gonna do. The first time you enter into where the actual computers are located, you're gonna do two sets of fingerprints with your index finger. They'll take a photo of you. That is probably the worst photo you've ever taken. You're going to sign some stuff. You're going to empty your pockets. They're going to use one of the little wands they use at the airport to make sure you're not sneaking anything in. They'll escort you to the desk. And I want you to be aware that that tutorial begins immediately the second you sit down. So don't dilly-dally. Then your subsequent breaks, which I was getting ahead of myself too, there will be a button that says take a break. It'll appear between sections and tell you how much time you have left. You will get up, you'll take your locker key and ID. That is the most important stuff during the day is the locker key and ID. You'll take a break. Then you return back, you empty your pockets, you get wanded down again, and then you resume your test. Um, and the last thing I want to talk about here is time tracking. So develop a strategy for pacing yourself. What I like to do, the blocks are 40 questions, so that's 60 minutes of time. Around 30 minutes or so, I would check the number of questions and make sure I was at least in the 20s, because that would mean I am roughly halfway done with half the amount of time left. So that was my quick check for like, all right, am I kind of on pace? If not, I would pick it up. Okay, we are almost done and we'll get to the Q&A. So after test day, you're going to have a lot of emotions. So with what these fun gifts like to explain to you is that you can do whatever you want. Some people are going to want to go to the club. Some people are going to get drunk. Some people are going to want to sleep for 24 hours. Some people are going to cry. You can do whatever you want. Do not feel like you got to do something. It's a lot of emotions after taking that test day. At least it was for me. I was very tired. I thought I was going to go have dinner with friends and celebrate and all that. I went to bed. So that's what I did. I hung out with friends the next day. But again, you do what you want, okay? Now, I'm sorry for the blurry GIF, but it's the best I could get. Please don't Google questions. You will drive yourself insane. If you walk out of that testing center, you pull out your phone and you Google questions and you're like, oh, I remember this question. I got it wrong. Whatever. What's done is done. You already hit the button. It doesn't matter. Don't Google questions. Don't talk about questions on Reddit. Don't all that. Again, you're not even allowed to do this anyway, but just don't Google questions, okay? Or Google topics or whatever. Just let bygones be bygones and move on, okay? Um, okay. So now we're at the Q&A portion. I'm gonna run through the chat real quick just to make sure. Um, do they provide whiteboards? Yes, they do. It's not necessarily a whiteboard, but it's more of like a dry erase laminated little piece of paper. Let's see. Let's see. How many Anki cards per hours did you do during dedicated? So Anki was the first thing I did. I did it from about 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. every day. Even on my days off, I did Anki. And so I'm a quick Ankier. I only did an hour or so. Probably had like 200, 250 reviews. I did do some Anki cards for missed questions. So I would look up the question ID within Anking and do those questions that I missed, or make my own little study cards if I wanted to. But I don't think you need to spend an absorbent amount of time on Anki during dedicated. Um, so how to manage Anki, UWorld, Boards and Beyond, and Sketchy. Again, if you feel like that is too much resource overload, cut something out. So mine of that list would probably be Anki to cut out. I think UWorld slash Amboss is you kind of have to have. You need to do practice questions. Sketchy, of course, incredibly useful for pharmacology, pathology, microbiology, all the subjects to review. Also, the nitty-gritty stuff like genetics and biochem, that's really hard to memorize. So again, you're probably going to cut some stuff out of your content review resources to help manage everything. But of that list, I'd probably chunk Anki first, and then probably Boards and Beyond, then Sketchy, a bit just being honest, and then UWorld last. Um, and then let's see here. In terms of the mixed study method, do you have any advice how much time to spend on content review for the day and how much time to spend on question banks reviewing them? Yeah. So what I did for my content review real quick was, so I dedicated a day like to a body system. So if it was cardiovascular, what I would do in the morning is read the entire cardiovascular section in first aid. And then I would review the pathoma chapter, like read through my notes of the cardiovascular system. Then I would go into Sketchy and do the cardiovascular drugs, certain microbes, pathology, stuff like that. That was my content review. I gave myself like 2 or 3 hours to do that. If I finished early, then I jumped into questions. But typically about 2 or 3 hours is what I did. Again, that's just me. The rest of the day was question banks and reviewing them. I did my question banks not mixed, so I did them all of like I would click cardiovascular and do the all the mixed cardiovascular questions. It takes me about a minute a question, so I did 40 question blocks. It would take me about 40 minutes, and then it takes me about an hour to review those questions. So I roughly budgeted that to do 40 questions and review them to the level of detail I'm happy with. It would take me personally 2 hours. So that means every block of 40, that's a 2 hour time block. That's just kind of how I knew what I would need to do. Um, are we allowed to bring our own headphones? You are not. They are provided for you. Would you be fine without Anki? Yeah, I think so. This is a contentious topic. Is Sketchy enough for step one? Sketchy, I love you. My answer just is going to be no. Sketchy has everything you really could need, plus a question bank and all that. But use more than that. You're gonna need something like first aid, like Pathoma, like UWorld. You need something extra. I think Sketchy is fine with me saying that they are not at the stage where every single ounce of your dedicated could be done using Sketchy. I think they're very close. And again, Sketchy, I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but that is my thoughts. Find a good Anki deck. That is going to be a great way to look at Reddit. I wish we had more time for that, but On King, Anking, has the premier deck for step one. Um, Let's see here. The session will be recorded. If you have an excess of time, can I use more resources and dedicated? Yeah, absolutely. If you have the money for it. How did you space out the MBME practice exams? So I tried to take one a week. There was one week where so I did a 5.5 week dedicated. Um, so there was a couple weeks, like 2 of the 5 weeks, I had to take two in a week or something like that. Um, I did, however, review them in their entirety the same day. And so I would do them all in the morning and then review them the same day. It was awful, but that is what I did. Are you allowed to have a wristwatch? I think so, as long as it's pretty basic. Um, Okay, and let's see. Should I do tutor mode or systemic, random, timed or tutored? So I prefer systems or like doing them by subject. At the beginning, a dedicated, and then towards the end, I recommend you do random questions. Um, and then I like the tutor mode personally. I do all 40 and then go through the answers. I know people who do a question, review it, do a question, review it, blah, blah, blah. That's a little bit difficult to do. Um, I am going to, at this point, there's still a whole bunch of stuff in the chat. I'm gonna jump over to the Q&A real quick, and then I will go back through this. I'm trying to answer everything in the amount of time. Um, is Comlex beneficial for step one candidates? If you go to a DO school, you need to take Comlex. If you don't go to a DO school, you don't have to take Comlex. That's my thought. Uh, is there a recording? Yes, we will have a recording. It will be emailed. I would like to speak to someone that only uses UWorld and Sketchy for step one. We can try to contact you with someone. If there's anyone in the chat who is planning to only use UWorld and Sketchy, then feel free to connect with this person. I can try to search for some names. I personally don't know anyone who only used UWorld and Sketchy. I have a Sketchy subscription. I'm wondering what are the high yield bookmarks for USMLE Step 1 Rapid Review. I don't technically know how to answer that. I don't know if Brenna, if you're hiding out in the background, want to type an answer to that one. I don't necessarily recall how it's laid out, but typically in those high yield bookmarks, if there's something you struggle with, you can just search it in Sketchy and find that. So that should be able. Can we have this PowerPoint? Yeah, I believe my wonderful sketchy friends, when this recording gets sent out, I don't care if you share this PowerPoint, so you have my blessing. Do you happen to know the average of people's first practice? I took the first CBSE today, but it's so hard. So this is really difficult. At the start of dedicated, I don't have an average for you. I would say people fall between the 40s and the 60s. Now, there's going to be people who are in the 70s and 80s and whatnot, but probably 40s to 60s um, is what I would say. Obviously, closer to 60, you'll feel a little bit more comfortable. Less than 40, probably honestly less than 50, you should be reaching out to people at your school to help guide you through the dedicated period. Um, we talked about the scheduling number for this. Do I have an opinion on Dr. Slaughterhouse's UWorld method of doing practice questions by doing untutored time 3 blocks of 40 per day versus doing tutored? I think it's personal preference. You do you, honestly. Um, sorry, I should hit done on these. I think that's a you do you type thing. I don't really have a preference. I just know what I like to do. So. We did this. Any tips for waking up early? I want to commit to having an earlier schedule. Your caffeine product of choice, maybe. The sheer anxiety of this exam will probably wake you up in the morning, but just slow and steady kind of shift over. That being said, if you have a really good time that you study, do that. If you want to study all night, just know that your exam is going to be in the morning, study all night if that works for you. Otherwise, again, going to bed early, some melatonin, caffeine, whatever you need to get yourself through it. Um, how can you practice taking breaks at this CBSA? It's just 4 sections without any breaks. Great question. So after you finish a section on the CBSA, you can pause it. And then I would just set a timer on your phone or whatever, or just know how much time that is. You can take a break. Now that's 4 sections, right? As you get closer to the actual test day, I'm going to encourage you to start lengthening your practice exams. So that is 4 blocks of 50 questions. So that's 200 questions towards test day, after you finish those 200 questions, take a little break, like a 5 minute break, pull up UWorld, Sketchy, whatever, and do another 40 questions. And then as you get even closer to test day, do your practice exam, do 40 questions, take a break, do 40 questions. The actual step exam is 280 questions. So I encourage you to at least do 280 questions in a day at least one time to feel what that is like. But yeah, you're gonna have to simulate your breaks the best that you can. Is there any info about accommodations for people with medical circumstances? You should absolutely contact the MBME and USMLE at this point. Do not wait any longer. Please reach out to them. There's a whole process for getting and taking your exam with accommodations. We already kind of talked about what resources. I was a big UWorld, Sketchy, First Aid, Pathoma, and Amboss. That is what I used. Can you write down some equations on the board during the tutorial before starting the exam? Absolutely. You can write down whatever you want on that board whenever you want to. More power to you. Is Sketchy all UWorld, Pathoma, and First Aid doable? It is. I did it. It is doable. It's a lot, but it is doable. Can you walk through a day of studying early in your dedicated period versus later? I feel like we kind of touched on this a little bit, but early and dedicated, I focused on the subjects that I was not so good at. So this is going to be like renal and various stuff like that. And then would do a little bit more content review earlier on versus questions. And then as towards the later in my dedicated period, it was less content review and more practice questions per day. That is my rough outline. I unfortunately do not offer any private scheduling. I will never, sorry, not, I was going to go on a tangent. I will never pay or like I will never sell my services or anything like that. I encourage you to reach out and look at other, resources, use the study schedule and all that. My email can be found on Sketchy and can definitely be shared if you want a quick just email talk. But I don't do any private sessions or anything like that. Maybe I should and make some money, but I like to do all my stuff for free. Um, can you review how you would recommend using Sketchy during dedicated? What sections are the highest yield? So, highest yield, pharmacology, microbiology. That's what Sketchy was founded on. I know Sketchy has a ton of other stuff and it's really wonderful, but that's still the highest yield, in my opinion. Um, Now, how to review it, I think you should be watching Sketchy all throughout second year, first year, blah, blah, blah. And so when I review it, I would do it section by section. So what I kind of struggled with. And then I just clicked through the icons again and just refreshed myself. It would give me a snapshot of the image as well as whatever text was written down was very important to me. So that's how I did it. Um, Out of the country, when do you suggest the courses are all covered in fourth year, which I'm currently in? I am not the best person to ask of when to take step one as an IMG, unfortunately. But you definitely need to have step one and step two taken before you apply to residency if you want to come to the United States. How long should a dedicated period be generally? Again, I know people who have taken 0 days for dedicated. I know people who have taken a year for dedicated. I generally recommend somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks is what I say, with the average at the University of California, Irvine being around 6 weeks, is what we typically do. How did I use first aid? So again, I would pull out the section, the chapter on whatever it was. I would read it, I would annotate it, I would scroll through it. If there's something I didn't understand, then I would Google, I would chat GPT, I would do whatever. I would look it up in Sketchy. I would go to Pathoma and I would just give myself a brief review of first aid. It's a big book, but hopefully you've annotated it throughout the year. What do you recommend for someone whose exam is in a month? Practice tests and practice questions. That's what I would recommend. Start focusing on the higher yield stuff, and make sure you know biostats and all that good stuff. That's very important to do. Um, about UWorld explanations, should we just read them or write them down? I don't think you have to write them down. I wrote like what I call one-liners. So if I got a question wrong on an Excel sheet that I had, I wrote down one sentence about why I got the question wrong. That was just my method of doing that. So the topic is Melman Medical. They have a worksheet called Arrows. I used that one, but that is really all that I used from Melman Medical. I personally don't have a very long dedicated. How do you just suggest studying while taking classes? More power to you. Do your best. Focus on the high yield stuff, and really only study if you feel like you have the energy. Learning in class is learning for step one. And so just do your best, honestly. Again, I feel for you. What to do for topics that are not like the organ systems, biostats, ethics, etc. Ethics, this is not a selling point or whatever. Amboss has a great ethics section. Doing the ethics questions on UWorld are very important too. Biostats, there is, if you Google it, Randy Neal, Neil, Biostats. He's a MD who teaches a biostats course. It's free. You can find it on YouTube and all that. That is all you need for biostats. That is the best way to do it. All right, I slogged through the Q&A. Brenna, if you want to roll with this giveaway while I scroll through the chat for a little bit, now is your time. Again, thank you all for coming. We're just at 5 o'clock PST. I hope this was helpful. This is something I'm very passionate about. I tutor students all the time on step one. And this is something again that I care a lot about. So I wish you all, great success. Everyone gets passes, and you'll survive. And hopefully you can watch back and look at this the night before, or whatnot, and it should help you out. So
Amazing. Thank you, Connor. I just dropped the giveaway winner, Yakov, in your name in the chat. So we'll reach out and get you all set up with your 6-month Sketchy sub. But I know, Connor, you said you've scrolling through. So if there's any other questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. But I appreciate everyone joining.
Brenna, I have a couple minutes to just knock out some of this stuff real quick.
Yeah,
Yeah?
go for it.
Cool. Step one does not have to be taken only in the United States. You can take it wherever you want. We have 16 minutes total for breaks throughout the entire day. Yes, assuming you bank that 15 minutes with the tutorial, you can have more than 60 minutes if you finish your sections early. The minimum break time is 45 minutes. Everything after that is extra for you. Are you world questions of similar difficulty as step one? I think so. I think they're a bit harder, in my opinion. Again, UWorld should be done as a learning tool instead of a testing tool, but I do think they're fairly similar. Um, Med school boot camp, I think that is the same thing as med ed boot camp. I never used it, so I can't really advise on that one. Um, let's see here. Um, how do I become a Sketchy ambassador? You get really, really lucky, and then you follow the link in here uh, that Brenna dropped. Um, do I recommend tackling all the systems at the same time or one system per time? I think you should jump around. I think you're probably going to need more than 1 day per system, so I think you should jump around. Um, let's see here. Since I mentioned the residency, thank you. Do you plan to give a talk about how to study and pass step two? I'm currently writing a step two guide right now. And this makes me think, Brenna, we should maybe schedule a webinar for step two at some point. So sure, we will probably do that too. If you pause CBSE, it does exit you from the screen and it feels scary, but yes, you can just resume. Um, when do you do? Okay, so let's talk about with Amboss, do you create your own study plan or did you do questions based on systems? I did it based on systems. You don't have to do just one system per day, but that is just what I did. So that's up to you. Um, I think for step one, UWorld is greater than Amboss. That being said, I'm a big Amboss fan. And then USMLE RX, not a lot of people use it, but it is actually really good. So I'm a big fan of USMLE RX. Um, my dedicated schedule is the roughly the dedicated schedule that's kind of like linked on Sketchy's website. So that is roughly kind of what I did. Um, let's see here. We got some other stuff going on. Yakov, congrats for winning, by the way. Thank you to whoever linked Randy Neal biostats. I love him. I would Venmo him if I could. Um, there was a question about Melman. Again, there's a lot of free access and free resources online using Melman Medical. Feel free to use it at your wish. Um, let's see here. Uh, I agree. Sketchy is finally fun. Um, what percentage of URL correct is a comfortable number when you do questions on a specific system? I can't give you an answer for that. I wish I could. Your percent correct should hopefully go up throughout dedicated, but we all have good sections and bad sections. So more so, again, this is why I don't like UWorld as a testing mechanism. I turn off the specific button that says your percent correct compared to other people because I think that's anxiety inducing. Um, let's see here. Is the blueprint study schedule creation useful? I think so. I don't know anything about med study. Sketchy does discounts all the time. And then there's some stuff about what to do. So I'm just going to reiterate this. For pathology, I am a big fan of Pathoma, as well as first aid, and of course, Sketchy. Um, for for pharmacology, Sketchy and first aid are my big ones. For biochem and genetics, again, Sketchy, I hate studying for those. Physiology, this is where maybe boards and beyond can be helpful. Also, again, USMLE first aid. For biostats, I recommend Randy Neal 100%. Um, and that is my recommendations. That is the entire chat that we are caught up. I am. Oh, there's one more Q&A. We're gonna get through everything, I promise. When I reviewed MBMEs the evening you took them, did you have a systematic approach to reviewing questions? So if I got the question right, then I would make sure that I read the question, kind of looked at what my second best answer was. So even though I got it right, I looked at my second answer choice to really read of why that was wrong. And I did, even though I got the question right, write down a sentence on what the topic was, since they like to reuse questions sometimes. If I got the question wrong, then I would read the entire explanation for sure, go through all the incorrect answer choices, and then write again a little note on why I got that question wrong. Is using two banks like Amboss and UWorld the best way, or just stick to UWorld? Whatever you can afford. I think sticking to just one is just fine. I think you'd be fine probably doing Sketchy's QBank too. But again, I whatever you can afford, I don't think you need both. You absolutely don't need both. But I had both subscriptions from day one of medical school, so I used both just because that's what I had. And what is best for psychiatry? Um, Again, first aid, I think is really good. Um, Definitely for the psychiatric drugs. Again, anything pharmacology, my answer is going to be Sketchy for sure, not just because I'm here, but that is what I actually recommend. And then Boards and Beyond has a really good section on psychiatry. Again, you would have to buy Boards and Beyond, and not sponsored, not anything, no cross collaborations that I know of. But I really like their psychiatry and their neurology section. I think they do a really good job with those. So, again, I'm not biased. I can recommend other resources too. Okay, that is everything. Thank you for being here, all 200 of you. Hopefully that was helpful. I will see you around at other webinars. Thank you for watching the recording. My name is